The second I saw my son's wheelchair, battered and broken, lying in pieces next to that gaudy golf cart with HOA security plastered on the side, I knew everything had changed forever. It was more than just a chair, more than a piece of metal and plastic. It was a symbol of all we had endured, of his fight to stay independent in a world that kept trying to push him down. And now, it was shattered. The sight of it in those shards felt like a punch to my gut. But what chilled me more was the feeling that this was no accident. No, this was deliberate, a warning, a declaration that they were in control now, and I was just another obstacle to be crushed. They didn't just cross a line, they erased it. The golf cart with HOA security stickers wasn't just patrolling, it was stalking. Their presence was like a predator circling, waiting for us to falter, to make a mistake. I watched them approach, engines humming like a predator ready to strike. Their navy polos, khaki shorts, aviator sunglasses, like they were the law of this neighborhood. But I knew better. I could see it in their eyes, something cold, something hungry. They didn't care about rules, they cared about power. And they saw my son, vulnerable and small, sitting in his wheelchair, sketching birds in his notebook as an easy target. I was kneeling on the porch, hands trembling slightly as I replaced a loose brick. I nodded politely at the approaching men, trying to keep my face calm, but inside, a fire was burning. They stopped at the curb, engines idling, as if they had all the time in the world to decide what to do next. One of them, puffing out his chest like a bantam rooster, called out in that overly authoritative tone, "Excuse me, sir. We're with Willow Bend Estate Security, just doing a routine patrol. Had some complaints about loitering." Loitering? I blinked, confused. I looked past him and saw my son sitting there, earbuds in, drawing those birds he loved so much. I clenched my jaw, tasting copper, anger, frustration, helplessness. That's my son. That's our property. I said it clearly, quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. He's sketching birds, that's all he's doing. The two men exchanged glances, uncomfortable, but their message was loud and clear. They didn't care. They wanted us to disappear. They lingered for a moment, then turned away, their golf carts rattling off down the street, radios crackling nonsense. I watched them drive off, fists clenched so tight my knuckles ached. Inside, a fuse had ignited, something I'd been trying to ignore, to pretend didn't exist. I told myself it was probably a misunderstanding, that it would blow over. But I was wrong. 2 days later, that pink violation notice was taped sloppily to our door like an insult. Unauthorized display of medical equipment in public view. I stared at it, my mind racing. Medical equipment? That was Matthew's wheelchair, his symbol of resilience. I crumpled the paper, feeling the weight of their cruelty settle deep, and then it got worse. That same afternoon, as Matthew tried to navigate the sidewalk, trying to find the easiest route to the park, the same golf carts followed him, now joined by a woman with a clipboard. They tailed him like vultures circling prey, whispering into radios, their presence oppressive. I watched from the window, muscles taut, heart pounding. Matthew kept going, trying to ignore them, but his face was tense. The clipboard woman leaned over, whispering something that made him stiffen. He pressed on, ignoring their presence, until finally the golf carts peeled away, leaving him pale and shaken. When he got home, he refused to talk, just said they told him he wasn't allowed to block pathways. I squeezed his shoulder, promising it wasn't his fault, but inside I felt helpless. That night, another pink slip appeared, this time citing obstructing walkways with a fine of $50. I refused to pay. Let them take me to collections. I knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, I stormed into the HOA office, a converted model home at the entrance, smelling of new carpet and false authority. The receptionist smiled politely but coldly, telling me to wait. I sat there, waiting, feeling my patience slipping. 15 minutes later, I was led into a conference room. Sitting across from me was Deborah Simmons. Yes, Deborah Simmons, the HOA president, her perfect bob and pastel sweater hiding a sharp mind underneath. I explained everything. Matthew's disability, the harassment, the illegal notices. I showed her paperwork. I begged her to see reason. She nodded, her smile tight and rehearsed, as if I was confessing to some crime. "We appreciate your concerns, Mr. Hayes," she said sweetly. "But community standards apply to everyone. The visibility of medical devices can hurt property values." My stomach clenched. "Are you serious?" I asked. "Are you suggesting my son hide his wheelchair inside?" She smiled wider, like a predator, like she had already won. "We're just encouraging residents to be mindful of appearances." I left, furious, knowing I couldn't let this stand. Not anymore. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, looking at the pink violation slips I had collected, each one a dagger. I thought about all the times I had told myself to stay quiet, to keep the peace. No more. I couldn't stand it. I pulled out my old badge wallet, the real one from my days in law enforcement, and placed it on the table, a silent vow. I had fought monsters in my career, cartel bosses, traffickers, men who would burn neighborhoods like this to the ground without a second thought. Compared to them, these HOA bullies were nothing. But it wasn't about size. It was about principle. They crossed a line, and now I was going to make them pay, and I knew I wouldn't stop until they did. The night stretched on, thick and oppressive, like a dark cloud pressing down on everything. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the pink violation, slips spread out before me like a battlefield map. Each one told a story of suppression, of a fight I refused to surrender. The weight of injustice bore down on my chest, but beneath it, a new resolve was stirring. Something fierce, something dangerous. I reached into a drawer, pulling out a small, worn leather notebook, something I'd kept since my days on the force. It held notes, contacts, plans. I flipped through the pages, memories flooding back, cases I'd solved, enemies I'd faced, moments when I'd had to be ruthless to protect what mattered. That part of me hadn't disappeared. It was buried beneath layers of frustration and fatigue, but tonight it was alive again. My phone vibrated suddenly, startling me out of my thoughts. I glanced at the screen, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered cautiously. "Hello?" A low, gravelly voice whispered. "You're not alone in this. I've been watching. They're not just HOA bullies. They're part of something bigger. You need to be careful." My heart pounded. Who was this? How did they know what I was thinking? But something in their tone, serious, urgent, made me listen. "Who is this?" "They call themselves the Watchers. They control things you don't even see. Local powers, corrupt officials, people who profit from keeping neighborhoods quiet and obedient. And now they've set their sights on you. On your son." A shiver ran down my spine. I kept my voice, steady. "What do you want?" "There's a man, an outsider who's been investigating them. He's dangerous to their plans. I can connect you with him, but you have to trust me. Trust no one else here." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, trying to process what I'd just heard. The neighborhood's petty tyranny suddenly felt like a symptom of something much darker, much more sinister. I looked at the violation slips again, but now they seemed like mere pawns in a far bigger game. My first instinct was to reach out to someone I knew, an old contact, a former colleague who had dealt with corruption and dirty politics. But I hesitated. Who could I trust? The HOA? The police? No. Those institutions had already shown their true colors. I needed to go outside the system. I grabbed my coat, slipped out quietly through the back door, and headed into the night. The street was eerily silent, the only sound the distant hum of the city and the soft rustle of leaves. I kept my head low, eyes scanning for any sign of surveillance. I knew they were watching, those golf carts, the security cameras. But I also knew I couldn't stop. Not now. I made my way to the old pier on the outskirts of town, an abandoned spot where I'd once gone to think, to clear my mind. It was the perfect place to meet this mysterious stranger. I parked my car behind some bushes, the engine quiet, and waited. Minutes felt like hours until I saw him. An older man, tall and lean, dressed in a dark hoodie and jeans, his face partially obscured by shadows. He approached cautiously, eyes darting nervously. "You're the one," I said as he drew closer. "The one who called and warned me?" He nodded, voice low. "Name's Marcus. I've been watching these people for years. They hide behind layers of lies. Politicians, businessmen, even law enforcement. They run the city like a puppet show, pulling strings behind closed doors. And your neighborhood? It's just the latest stage." I felt my fists clench. "What do they want with my son? With me?" Marcus looked around, then leaned in. "They're after control. They want to keep everyone in line, obedient, scared, compliant. Your son is a symbol of resistance, someone they can't break. If they succeed here, they'll expand. You're in the middle of something much bigger than you realize." I swallowed hard. "And what's the plan? How do I fight them?" He hesitated, then handed me a small flash drive. "Inside this is evidence, documents, recordings, names. It's enough to blow their operation wide open. But you have to be careful. They monitor everything. If they suspect you're onto them, they'll strike back harder." I looked at the drive, then back at Marcus. "Why are you helping me?" He paused, eyes haunted. "Because I have a daughter, and I refuse to let them turn her into another pawn. If you're willing to stand up, I'll stand with you, but you have to act fast. They're planning something big, something that could destroy everything." A gust of wind swept through, carrying the scent of salt and smoke. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Danger, yes, but also hope. Somewhere out there, someone else saw what I saw, someone who understood. Maybe, just maybe, we could fight back. Nodded, clutching the drive tightly. "Where do we start?" Marcus looked over his shoulder, then pointed to the dark horizon. "First, we expose them. Gather allies. And then, we strike when they least expect it." The night stretched ahead, full of risks and unknowns. But I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let them win. Not without a fight. The moment I saw the shadows moving inside the old town hall, my pulse skyrocketed. I crouched behind a battered pillar, heart hammering in my chest. The flickering streetlights cast uneven shadows on the cracked walls, and every breath I took felt like a risk. I knew they were inside, those figures I'd glimpsed through the broken windows, whispering and passing around what looked like plans, blueprints, or perhaps more evidence of their corrupt dealings. I pressed my ear to the wall, trying to decipher their words. The muffled voices carried a sinister tone. They were planning something big enough to threaten everyone in the neighborhood. I had to get inside, find out what they were up to, and stop it before it was too late. My hand hovered over my pocket, clutching the small key I'd stolen from one of their guards earlier that evening. The old town hall's door was locked, but I'd managed to pick the lock with a paperclip. Now it was just a matter of timing, waiting for the right moment to slip inside unnoticed. Lena's voice suddenly cut through my thoughts. I looked around and saw her crouched behind a pile of broken crates, eyes sharp and focused. She was a force of nature, one of the few people left who still believed in fighting back against this corruption. "Any sign of movement?" she whispered. "Not yet," I replied softly. "But they're definitely inside. I saw the shadows, heard the voices. They're planning something big, something that could devastate the neighborhood if it goes through." She nodded. "We need to get closer. We can't just stand here waiting. If they're preparing to move out, we need to intercept before they do." I hesitated, then nodded. "Agreed. But we have to be smart. No unnecessary risks. We need a plan." Lena pulled out a small battered radio that looked like it had seen better days. She clicked it on, whispering into the static, trying to catch any chatter. "If they have a communication line, I want to know what they're saying. We need to know their next move." A crackling voice came through the radio, faint but clear enough. "All units move out at midnight. Secure the perimeter. No mistakes." My stomach clenched. Midnight was only minutes away. We had to act fast. I took a deep breath, then slowly pushed the door open, careful not to make a sound. The hinges squeaked slightly, but no one inside seemed to notice. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Men and women in dark clothing moved around, some with masks, others with guns slung over their shoulders. Lena signaled for me to follow her. We slipped behind a row of crates, trying to stay out of sight. I could see maps on the wall, strategic locations, routes, safe houses. This was planning on a scale I hadn't imagined. Suddenly, a voice boomed from the center of the room. "Tonight, we finalize everything. The neighborhood will be ours and nobody will stop us." I froze. Lena's eyes widened in shock. That confirmed it. This wasn't just harassment or corruption. They were planning a large-scale operation, a raid, a shutdown, or perhaps something even worse. I pulled out the flash drive, clutching it tightly. If I could get this evidence to the right people, I could expose them all. But I needed to get closer, get the files onto a secure device, and get out before they spotted us. I signaled to Lena. "We need a distraction. I'll create a diversion. Then I'll slip in and grab what I can." "Be careful," she whispered. "They're heavily armed. And if they catch us—" "They won't," I interrupted. "I've done this before." I crept towards a nearby supply closet, spotting a metal pipe leaning against the wall. Quietly, I grabbed it, knowing I'd need it if things went south. Then I waited. A guard approached, talking into a walkie-talkie. I timed my move perfectly, swinging the pipe with all my strength and knocking him out cold. The others turned, startled, but I was already moving. I threw a piece of broken glass at a nearby window, shattering it to create noise and chaos. "Run!" I shouted to Lena as I darted into the room where the documents were stored. I knew I only had a few minutes before they realized what had happened. Inside, stacks of paper and digital drives lay scattered. I grabbed the flash drive, stuffing it into my pocket. As I turned to leave, a hand grabbed my shoulder. "Thought you could sneak out, huh?" A voice sneered. I spun around, facing a tall, broad man with a scar running down his cheek. One of their enforcers. He drew a pistol, finger tightening on the trigger. I reacted instinctively, throwing myself to the side and grabbing a nearby chair, smashing it against him. The gun went off, ricocheting into the ceiling. Lena burst in behind me, gun drawn. "Get down," she yelled, firing a warning shot that made the enforcer stumble back. We didn't wait. We bolted through the back exit into the alleyway. The sound of sirens grew in the distance, probably from the neighborhood patrols alerted by the chaos. We ran without looking back, lungs burning, hearts pounding. When we finally stopped behind a row of dumpsters, Lena pressed her back against the wall, catching her breath. "Did you get everything? Get?" she asked, eyes scanning the dark streets. "Yeah," I said, pulling the drive out of my pocket. "This is enough to bring them down. But we're not safe yet. They'll be coming after us." She nodded grimly. "Then we need to move fast. The meeting is tonight. If we're right, they're planning to make their move at midnight. We have maybe an hour before they execute their plan." I looked at the time. It was close. Just enough time to warn the neighborhood, or at least get to a safe place. "Where do we go from here?" I asked. Lena's eyes sharpened. "We hit them where it hurts. We leak this evidence to the press, to the FBI, whoever's willing to listen. We expose their entire operation, but we need allies. People who aren't bought or threatened." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation settle on my shoulders. "Then that's what we do. We fight back. No more hiding. No more silence." In the distance, sirens wailed louder. The city was waking up to the chaos we'd started. But I knew this was just the beginning. The real storm was coming, and I was ready to face it. The distant wail of sirens echoed through the night, growing louder with each passing second. Lena and I pressed ourselves against the damp, graffiti-covered brick wall, hearts hammering in our chests. The small flash drive clenched tightly in my hand felt like a lifeline, a seed of hope amid the chaos. We knew that within minutes, everything could change, either for the better or the worst. "We've got maybe 20 minutes, Lena whispered, glancing at her battered watch. Her voice was barely audible over the hum of approaching sirens. "They're mobilizing fast. We need to move now." I nodded, breathing shallowly. "We can't afford to waste any more time. If they get wind of us, it's over." She looked around and pointed toward a narrow alleyway. There's an old fire escape on that building just down the street. We climb, cross the rooftops, and make our way to the old fire station. It's abandoned, but secure enough to hide us. I hesitated, for a moment, then nodded. Sounds risky, but it's our best shot. We can't stay here and wait. The air was thick with tension, and every sound seemed amplified. The distant barking of dogs, the muffled voices of patrols, the faint clang of metal from inside the town hall. I kept my hand inside my jacket, clutching the drive like a talisman. We had only one chance to get this out. Go, Lena motioned, and we darted into the shadows. We moved quickly, sticking to the darker corners, avoiding pools of light cast by flickering street lamps. Our footsteps echoed softly as we navigated the maze of alleyways, hearts pounding in unison. Every second brought us closer to discovery, or salvation. Suddenly, a muffled shout erupted ahead, a guard signaling an alert. I froze, signaling Lena to stop. Through the darkness, I saw figures moving, guards, probably enforcers, closing in on our route. Their silhouettes outlined against the faint glow of streetlights. They were sealing off the perimeter. Damn, Lena whispered, eyes narrowing. They're cutting us off. I scanned the surroundings and spotted a fire escape ladder on a nearby building. There, I pointed silently. We climb and cross over the rooftops. It's risky, but it's our best chance. Without hesitation, we sprinted toward it. The rusted metal stairs groaned under our weight as we climbed, hearts pounding as if they wanted to burst free from our chests. Once on the roof, we paused, catching our breath and scanning the scene below. From this vantage point, the city stretched out beneath us, a sprawling network of dark streets and flickering lights. The distant sound of sirens grew louder, signaling that the authorities were closing in. Our window was shrinking fast. Look, Lena said, pointing to a dilapidated building across the alley. That's our target. We jump when I say. Ready? I asked, eyes narrowing. Now, she replied. We ran, leaping across the gap with a collective surge of adrenaline. I felt my stomach tighten as we hit the other side, landing hard on the crumbling roof. For a moment, I thought we might tumble off into the darkness below, but we kept moving, racing along the rooftops like shadows chasing dawn. Suddenly, a loud alarm blared from the town hall, their signal that the operation had begun. Lights flickered, and distant shouting echoed through the night. They knew we were coming, and they didn't intend to let us slip away easily. We ducked behind a ventilation pipe, catching our breath. Lena pulled out her phone and rapidly dialed a number. Hey, she whispered into the receiver. It's me. We're on the move, but they're closing in fast. I need you to leak this evidence to the press, expose everything. This drive has the files that can bring them down. There was a pause. Got it, a gruff voice replied. I'll do it anonymously if I have to. Just stay safe. Lena pocketed the phone and looked at me. We're almost there. The safe house is just a few blocks away. Once we're inside, we can breathe and plan our next move. We moved swiftly through the shadows, navigating narrow back alleys and avoiding patrols. Every step felt like walking a tightrope. One wrong move and everything would fall apart. As we approached the outskirts of the neighborhood, I caught sight of a familiar abandoned building, an old fire station that had been shut down years ago. It was perfect for hiding out, at least temporarily. Keep your eyes peeled, Lena warned. They'll be looking for us everywhere now. We slipped inside the fire station's dark, empty halls. The place smelled of dust and rust, but it was secure enough for us to lay low. I set the drive down on a dusty countertop, then pulled out my phone to check for updates. No signal. Damn, I muttered. They're probably trying to track us. We need to get to a place with better reception. Lena nodded. Let's move to the nearby cafe. There's a back room that's less monitored. We can call the authorities, warn them about the raid, and get the message out. We exited the fire station and hurried through the deserted streets, blending into the shadows. Every sound made my skin crawl. Footsteps, distant voices, the hum of police radios. We knew they'd be coming soon, and time was running out. Finally, we reached the small cafe on the corner. Lena slipped inside, motioning for me to stay outside. She returned a moment later, a determined look on her face. Good news, she said. I managed to get through to a contact in the police. They're aware of the operation and they're mobilizing to intercept. But we have to give them the evidence now, before the plan is finalized. She handed me a small, battered envelope. Inside was a USB drive, our salvation and our curse. If we could get it into the right hands, the corrupt officials and gang leaders would be exposed. But if they caught us now, everything was lost. Are you ready? Lena asked, voice steady, but tense. I nodded. Let's do this, it's now or never. We stepped out into the night once more, hearts pounding, knowing that the next move could change everything. The city was on the brink of chaos and we were its unlikely catalysts, fighting against the darkness with nothing but our courage, our resolve and this fragile hope. Because tonight we had ignited a spark. And once ignited, some fires wouldn't be extinguished.